Hey friends, for today's video, I'm going to talk about the apology. The etymology of the word apology means preparing one's own defense or preparing like a speech in one's own defense. Of course, that definition or that creation of that word comes from years and years and years and years and centuries ago. And now apology means acknowledging when you've done something wrong, or maybe it's used in sympathy. So I can think of a couple of things. Like I remember when I was little, and you know how you would get in trouble, you'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. My dad would always say, sorry is a sorry word. And I'm always like, I don't know what that means. Or think about like when, if you have kids and you scold them and their response is almost like bullets, like, I'm sorry, they're like shooting the sorry at you. And you're pretty sure that is not legit. Or what about if your partner says, oh, I'm sorry, and you're like, what are you sorry for? Are you sorry for that sorry ass apology? But really, what does it mean to apologize? We talked about this in one of my groups recently, just last week, and it was surprisingly a juicy topic. So there were a couple different perspectives. That's the reason I say it was surprising, because I kind of just figured it was obvious what apologizing meant. What apologizing meant. It means seeking forgiveness, making amends, acknowledging you've done something wrong, right? And so I was kind of under the impression that it was a pretty straightforward concept, but no, apparently it isn't. Maybe the concept is straightforward, but the way people view apologies is not. So a portion of the group said that apologies were unnecessary, that they were just efforts for the apologizer to make themselves feel better, that it is doesn't really have any value, especially for a more cynical person. They view it as, what does it even mean? It means nothing, especially if you're not going to change your behavior. And I know a lot of us, we all know people who say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, but they do it again. So that's kind of the cynical perspective. And then there was the other side of the perspective, which was, I am saying sorry, not just for myself, but also for you. So you realize that I know that I didn't understand in that moment, depending on what the reason for the apology. Or that, so for example, say you said something like awful to someone a couple years ago, and it came up in your mind and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I was wrong. I wasn't even thinking about their perspective or what they were going through. So offering that person an apology is a chance to say, I realized that I wasn't really thinking about you when I said that. And I apologize because, you were going through some stuff and that was insensitive of me. And not even accurate. It was maybe ignorant. So that's like a possibility depending on what the person did. But the objective there, in my case, was to let the person know that I see what happened there. I see now what you were going through and how I contributed to that negatively. And I want to take responsibility for that. And I also want to validate your experience as well. So that's one way to look at an apology. So there's the cynic who says, doesn't mean anything to me. The person who thinks that they're just doing it for their own gain, they're like, keep it to yourself. It's like my dad would say, sorry is as sorry does. And those in the camp of keep it to yourself tend to see it as your actions speak louder than your words. Don't waste your words on me. Show me that you can do better. And then I talked about my perspective, which is it's about validating an experience by letting the person know that I see them, that I understand as much as I can, that I crossed a line. And then there is the other perspective, which is about relationship building. relationship repairing or relationship maintaining, which is when something happens, as it does, if you have a partner, or really if you exist in a space with any other human being, that things happen, conflict comes up. And so if you are able to say, I'm sorry that I stole your stapler when you needed it, that gives the other person a chance to say, I really needed that stapler, and you didn't listen to me when I said you couldn't borrow it, and you borrowed it anyway. And, it messed me up. And then it can go from there, but it opens dialogue and gives people a chance to express their feelings and the impact that the act that's requiring the apology, the impact that had on that person. That's not easy to do. I'm going to post something very interesting too, that the people who had the perspective of keep your apology to yourself, its actions speak louder than words, those majority of them were men. In fact, I don't think any of the women in my group agreed with that. I think it was the men who that was their perspective. The women's perspective was a little more like, no, it's important to apologize. It's important to experience an apology, and to be brave enough to give one. So it's just really interesting. So where do you stand on apologizing? I'm wondering, is it hard? I think that's a dumb question. It is hard. I think it's hard. I think when you've really done something wrong and you have to acknowledge that you crossed a line, or that you caused somebody else pain, like true pain, it's really hard to come forward and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that. And it's not just I'm sorry. To me, it's also about providing an explanation, not as an excuse, but as a way of seeking understanding. Now, does that mean you're going to be forgiven? No. And that is something that the other group was also saying, that seeking out an apology, seeking out forgiveness does not mean you will be forgiven. And if you're not going to be forgiven, what's the point? I still think there is a point to it. I think that we are responsible for ourselves, and being responsible for yourself and maturing yourself involves acknowledging when you did something wrong. That's what I think. I want to know what you think too. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.